had classes today so far? Only a handful of you. I imagine it might be pretty nice to sleep in for a little bit, um, but then getting right onto Zoom is always like a Zoom. I don't know if you can hear my daughter downstairs. She has a Zoom meeting right now too. She's very excited about the Zoom meeting that she's having with her class of 3-year-olds. They're all very productive right now. So she's just laughing. That's all they're doing right now is just laughing. Okay, so today I posted our notes for class up on our Google Classroom. On a Google Classroom, so it's up on here. So there's a few things. We only have chapter 5 for today. It's a pretty short chapter, so there's not a bunch of stuff that we can really have to go over in terms of understanding what's happening in terms of the plot, because this novel is not really based in plot that much, or if at all. There really is no plot. It's just, as we noted before, a bunch of rambling, and our narrator, Huron sort of acknowledges this in this chapter when talking about wine and why vineyards are looked down upon, but there's going to be wine in heaven, but you can't have wine on earth. He's like, isn't that kind of strange? And he says, I just started to realize I like to ramble. And that's on page 52. But that's something we've noted already, that he likes to ramble and just sort of go with whatever's on his mind. I don't remember if we talked about this before, because time is sort of just blurred into nothing. But does anybody know what this kind of narrative would be called when a character just lets themselves, like the narrative is just whatever the character is thinking at that moment, and it keeps going and going and going? You would just follow their thoughts along. Juniors might remember this, called stream of consciousness. Stream of consciousness, where the character doesn't really filter their thoughts. It just keeps going and going and going, like our thoughts do. And that's what our narrator is doing, because he's talking to someone, right? So we get that in this chapter, an acknowledgement, at least, from Aharon that he's a rambler and he likes to ramble. And it's also kind of connected to him liking to have one or two or several glasses of wine to drink. As he notes in this chapter that, and this goes back to his rambling, I've got several images in my head on page 56, but I think I've been drinking too fast. So he likes to drink. So any sort of character that you find in a novel or a story that is drinking a lot, and they start like talking, it's like they are just letting whatever's in their mind come out because they've been drinking a lot. But that also makes us like, okay, how much is the story really truthful? Is it because he's drinking is more truthful? Or if he's drinking, does it sort of cloud the memories a little bit? And so he is sort of, as he says, I got several images in my head. I have so many things I'm trying to control in my head, but because I'm drinking too much, my brain is not like really focused. And that contributes to his rambling, right? So that's something that we get more in this chapter. Also, just want to point out before, I know I just sort of got right into it, things we did for last class. I know I didn't have notes for last class. I realized I didn't have those, but this is what we went over during that class. If you weren't here, but some of the main points that we talked about, or sort of went over what was happening in chapters 3 and 4. And then chapter 5, like I said, like we sort of noted, this novel's not much of a plot. There's not really anything happening except these two people talking in a bar, and that's it. That's what the plot is. That's what's happening. Some things are reiterated. Some of the seven main themes that we've talked about so far are reiterated in this chapter that we got right at the beginning of the novel, right? Names. Names are important, right? Names are important for our characters here. And as he says, you can't easily kill a man when he has a given name. That's on page 53. And then he also notes, his brother Musa is the most second important character in the book, a stranger, but he has no name, no face, no words. But this leads me to the question, right? Should Heron's concerns about naming and the stranger remind us of any characters in this novel? do we have any characters in this novel that do not have a name or a face or any words attached to them? Yeah, Georgia.
The person he's talking to in the bar.
Pretty much, right? We got that in the very first chapter, right? When he asks him on page, let me see if I can find this real quick here. On page 14, he says, we noted this before, no, the first night I always pick up the tab. By the way, what's your name? We never get it. At least at this point in the novel, we don't get it. So we have a character that has no name, that has no face really, is kind of just you or your author, right? He's like, we're learning about this character from our narrator, like how he describes him. Okay. Okay. Get up. Here's my cat. There we go. Okay, so Zoom teaching is so fantastic. So many things can happen. So, right, we have our narrator who's like, names are important, yet simultaneously in the novel we don't get a name. But the person that he's talking to, right, is presumably French. And perhaps this is intentional, not naming the French person. The person that has a name in The Stranger, or the nationality, right, does not have a name here. That might be intentional. We can think about that. Why would that be intentional, right? I got this from Wikipedia. If I can actually just share the screen with you, if you're not looking at it on your own computer device thing. So there's an interview that our author gave about naming. And this is, so I stole this from Wikipedia because that's what you do. Ever since the Middle Ages, the white man has the habit of naming Africa and Asia's mountains and insects, all the while denying the names of the human beings they encounter. By removing their names, they render banal murder and crimes. By claiming your own name, you're making a claim of your humanity and thus the right to justice. So I say, thanks, Wikipedia, that's my citing it. So names matter, right? Names matter here. So the fact that we don't have a name for a character should also matter for us too. So we can think about that too. Why not name a character when the other character is emphasizing the importance of names? Other things to think about with this particular book. We also talked about, I also asked you last class about the differences between fact and truth and what that means. And that could go back again to the rambling quality of the narrative. And I asked sort of a question, why would this rambling narrative matter, especially when it comes to relaying ideas of fact and truth? How does rambling maybe mix the line between what is true and what's not true, what's fact and what's not fact by rambling? I don't know if any of you noticed this, and maybe I'm just misreading something. This goes again, the idea of truth and mixing truth, and I say maybe it's just me. At one point, Heron acknowledges, or many times he says that Rousseau was executed, right? In The Stranger, he was executed, he was killed for the murder. He notes on page 55, even after his execution, he said, blah, blah, blah. But he also acknowledges or presumes Rousseau was released from prison and then wrote The Stranger. On page 53, when the murderer leaves prison, he writes a book that becomes famous. So it's like, did I misread it? So did Rousseau leave prison and then was executed, which seemed kind of strange. Here we're gonna let you go and then we're gonna execute you. I don't know if I'm just misreading it, but it seems pretty clear, at least to me, is like that's a mixing up of the truth, but maybe I'm just misreading it. Again, so we have this constant questioning of what is true or not, right? Oh, come back, stop. What are you doing, computer? Come back to me. There we go. And again, to another thing that's reiterated, truth and subjectivity, truth in your own personal experiences. So a big quote that's on page 57, I think is really important. This story, the one that we're reading right now, takes place somewhere in someone's head, in mine and in yours, in the heads of people like you, and a sort of beyond. So the story, right? This story is taking place in our narrator's head, but also taking place in our head as the reader, also taking place in the head of the person listening to the story. And we all might hear or read different things into the story. We might interpret it differently, right? Even things that we all experience at the same exact time, we all might interpret that event very differently from one another. We might all have different feelings about it, and our feelings about an event or an experience can alter the memory of that experience, right? So if like you really loved something that you experienced, you might have a very happy, positive memory about that time. But if somebody hated that same exact thing, I mean, like I hated it, I had a horrible time, nothing about it was good, right? The memories of it are be more negative, even if the experience is exactly the same in terms of like the same, we experience the same thing at the same exact time, different emotions that go into it can alter your memory of that event. And so that's what is sort of happening here, right? This story takes place in someone's head, in mine and in yours, and the people like you, as a people like you, and a sort of beyond, which is an interesting way to sort of put it, but he doesn't really clarify what that means. So the thing I want us to think about for a question I want you to think about and respond to and answer to for Friday, and I clarify it a bit down here as well. How does this line reflect back in Camus' The Stranger? Or, as I'm trying to clarify what I'm trying to say here, or if we're to view the stranger as a real person's account, so their subjective account, how does Meursault, in The Stranger, construct his narrative about subjective experiences versus murder, right? So if everything is just personal, everything's subjective, but also is built on memories that could be altered in some way, how are we supposed to understand the stranger then? Is that a truth? Is that factual? So I try to clarify that. I might not be clear enough what I mean. Is Haran uh, intentionally making us rethink the truth of Meursault's story? Can we trust either story? Um, so that's what I want us to think about. Oops. That's what I want us to think about, okay, for Friday. So it's a bit more broad of a comment there, more broad of a question, but take some time to think about how this novel is making us question everything that happens in The Stranger. If Meursault says these things, we noted when we read the Stranger that it's all memory, but memory is fickle. Memory is not something to be trusted. Yeah, we're trusting the narrative at the same time. And that's what our narrator here in Haran, he's sort of saying too, right? This guy wrote this great book, everybody loved it, and everybody seemed to forget about the murder. So what are we supposed to do? Are we supposed to just believe the older narrative because it's older, it's been around longer? Or is my story more true because it's my experience? Or is it equally true? Does that make sense? Is that clear? I don't know if that's very clear. Lily, Yusuf, is that okay? Yeah. So that's something I just wanted you to think about for our question on Friday. If you're like, can you clarify what you mean by this? Please tell me. I'm more than happy to try to clarify it. But just think about that, what this novel is asking us about personal experiences and what is true or is not true. Okay. So that's the question that we're dealing with right now. So I think I went, and also we also mentioned too last class Haran's view of women. He has pretty negative, or this very kind of like simplistic view of women. We don't really have any female characters in this novel except for his mother, and he doesn't like them. But other women are sort of prostitutes, or he has like a really kind of one thing or the other type of perspective on women. And that is something that continues in this chapter, right? So we have this continued, and they're not really as predominant as the questions about truth and Musa's own story, but they're there. These critiques of women, or at least like these views of women as prostitutes or just something else, they're sprinkled in throughout. And those little tiny pieces are going to give us a bigger image of what Haran is like as a person and how he views the world. Because also know he never got married. It's like, why? Perhaps because he has a bad relationship with his mother, which then made him view women as all one thing, right? That could be a possible reason. So even though this chapter was really, really short, it didn't really push things along that much, even though it does, if I remember correctly, it does talk a bit about the secret and presumably that he murdered someone. If that's like the big plot thing, if that's like the plot that we're trying to figure out, that did our narrator murder someone? And he did, presumably. On page 54, he says, I've got a mother and a murderer on my back too. Me too, it's fate. I too have killed, in accordance with the desires of this earth, one day when I had nothing to do. I swore to myself so many times I'd never revisit this episode, but every move I make either dramatizes it or evokes it involuntarily. I was waiting for a little nosy nose like yourself to come along, someone I could finally tell this tale to. And then he sort of stops after that. So that little piece about our narrator too is coming into light, that he did commit a murder. At some point, he murdered someone. That could be like the primary plot point, right? That is pushing the narrative along. We're trying to figure out this secret. We want to know the secret. Who did he murder? How did he murder them? Why did they murder him? And why is this weighing on his head so much? Who exactly was killed for what reason? Because he says, I had nothing else to do, which goes back to Merceau's like murdering the brother for no reason whatsoever, nothing really else to do. So I know I've just been talking at you. I've been talking at you for 20 minutes now. Do any of you have any thoughts about this chapter or anything else that we've read so far for the novel? Yeah, Georgia.
So, you know how the earlier part were the confusing slash mixing the truth? Like how when the murderer leaves prison, he writes a book that becomes famous.
Yeah.
So I noticed that when I was reading, and then he was also talking about like the murder part. So what if Marceau actually got out of prison and then he just murdered him?
Oh, you're saying like he executed him?
Maybe. We don't know.
That could there could be something. But if that were the case, remember that Haran was only 7 years old when it all happened.
Well, yeah, but
Maybe a child.
maybe 7-year-olds just got a murder plan. You never know.
Perhaps. So there might be something to that. We got to see. Or maybe Marceau got out of prison, wrote the book, and then later, as our narrator got older, found Marceau and killed him. That'd be a cool rewriting of The Stranger. We're going to see what that happens. He was executed, right? Marceau was executed. We don't know by whom. We presume it's by the state, presume it's by the prison, right? But we don't know exactly. But then it'd be like, okay, why are you still? If you killed Marceau, you got revenge, right? Why are you still like so infatuated with this story? That could be something to think about too. If you got the revenge, like it's all done, let's figure it out. Why are you still so focused on sort of getting the story out? Like because the other story is more popular, we want to get his story out there. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. Lily, are you just painting your fingernails and just having them dry? Yeah. Okay. So, any other thoughts about this chapter or anything that I put in the notes, or just what things that you may have noticed in the novel? No. Okay. Cool. Great. Okay. So we're gonna leave it at that then. This book, we're almost about halfway through. We're gonna read just so it's on the notes as well. So for Friday, we're going to read chapters 6 and 7. So just two chapters for Friday. So you have plenty of time to get through those. I'm going to put the Google question up after we finish the class today. So make sure you answer the question above by Friday as well, please. Excuse me. And then make sure to respond to one other person's response by Monday. So on the Google Classroom, it will say the questions due on Monday, but that's just because I want to make sure you still have access to the questions so you can respond to them, okay? So write a response by Monday, but make sure you respond to somebody else's response by Monday, but answer the question by Friday, okay? Any questions about that we're going to be doing for Friday? Okay, great. So I'll put all that stuff up, question up later. I'll put the chapters up later today too. I just got to scan them. And I will see you all again on Friday. Okay? Bye, everybody.